Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the IWillAim Podcast. Our topic for today is conversations that matter, bias, empathy, and leadership with Jennifer Wilson. Difficult conversation, hidden bias, the need for empathy. These are challenges every leader and every human faces. Today, I'm joined by award winning author Jennifer Wilson, whose book, The Heart of Homestay, has touched thousands. Together, we'll explore how empathy and the tool like Colby assessment can transform the way we communicate, connect, and lead, both in our workplace, in our personal life. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Looking forward to our conversation. How about if we kick it off with a quick introduction from you?
Thank you. Yeah. So, as you said, I'm an author. I'm also a leadership coach and business consultant, facilitator, and speaker. And I have a background in midwifery. I used to be a registered midwife. That was my first career out of university. And then I joined our family business called Canada Homestay Network. And that's the business that inspired me to write the book. So my mother started Canada Homestay Network 30 years ago, and we've placed over 100,000 students across Canada with families when the students come to Canada to study English or go to high school or attend university or college. So I loved that experience and learned a lot about people and what makes us tick and how families work and about conflict and communication. And I used all of that knowledge and expertise along with a lot of research I did and interviews with students and host families to write a book that would help hosts make the most of their experience. I stepped away from my work in the family business about 2.5 or 3 years ago to launch my own coaching and consulting business and to focus on my writing. And here I am.
Let's dive on to our topic because it's a difficult conversation. Many
Yeah.
people avoid difficult conversation out of fear or discomfort. What strategy do you recommend or approach to begin that conversation?
Yeah, thanks, Will. So I think the first thing to do is consider your attitudes about conflict. So, as you say, a lot of people avoid difficult conversations out of fear or discomfort. If you can reframe your kind of standing expectations about what difficult conversations are from something that's scary or hard or could damage a relationship, and instead look at it as an opportunity to strengthen the relationship, I think that's the first step. Family therapist Jesper Jewell says that expressing feelings maintains a warmth of contact. But we often forget that the warmth that exists in relationship arises from two sources: what joins us together and what causes friction. Both are always present and both can be equally warm. And what happens when we think about conflict as an opportunity to strengthen a relationship, it reminds us and it helps us to restore harmony, because the only way to restore harmony is to address the issue. So, having said that, lots of people, well, most people develop their sense of conflict and what conflict means when they're kids. And we learn that those habits and expectations from our families. So it can be really hard to reframe this conflict is bad to conflict is good. So it really takes a lot of faith in your own ability to grow, belief that the upside is worth the effort, and a willingness to make mistakes, because you will make mistakes doing this. Even me, when I approach difficult conversations with my kids still to this day, they're young adults, so it's a very different dynamic, but I still stumble. So understand that it's okay to make mistakes. So once you have the courage to try, there's 6 steps that I recommend when approaching a difficult conversation. And the first 2 are around preparation. So I think this is the other mistake that a lot of people make, is they just charge into a difficult conversation without really pausing to think about timing or purpose. So that's the first thing, is this the right time to have this conversation? And I'll say a lot of difficult conversations kind of come upon us spontaneously. We just find something out, we have to confront it, or somebody confronts us. But I really feel that this doesn't need to take a lot of time. It can only just be a couple of minutes, really. And if you have time to talk, you have time to prepare. So first, check your purpose and your timing. Why are you having this conversation? And is this the right time? And then the second step of preparation is to get curious and identify what you're bringing into the conversation. And all of us make up stories about other people. A simple example is if your colleague comes into work late, we instantly make up a story about why they're late. And if it's a colleague that we really like, we'll often give them the benefit of the doubt and assume that maybe they just had a bad morning. But if it's a colleague that we don't really like, or this is the third or fourth time this week that they've been late, then you start to make up stories about their motivations and their intentions and their commitment to the job. And you don't give them the same benefit of the doubt. So part of preparation is slowing down to notice what the story is that you're telling about this other person, about the situation, about your role in the conflict as well. And if you can reflect on that, then it helps you approach the conversation with more kind of separation from it and a deeper kind of insight as to what could be going on. The third step is to actually start the conversation. And I recommend beginning like a friendly observer or like a mediator. So instead of coming in with, a comment about what happened from your perspective, you can try and use what's called the third person. So if there was a third person standing observing what's happening here, how would they describe the situation instead of from your perspective or from your other person's perspective? And if you can begin that way, it kind of like takes the heat out of the conversation already from the beginning and allows you to approach this in a much more neutral way. And then the fourth step is to listen. So a lot of us make the mistake of wanting to offload our own feelings and concerns and angst right from the beginning, but we can't listen to other people when we have our own stuff that we need to say. So if you can put yourself into the position of listening instead of sharing, what it allows is the other person to kind of empty themselves, and then you can fill them up with what you have to say. They won't hear what you want to say until they've had a chance to offload their own feelings. So listen, and listen with genuine curiosity. In other words, don't come in with your own judgments. Don't evaluate the veracity of what they're saying. Don't try to use your story to influence what you're hearing. Really just try to be open to what they're saying. And then step 5 is you get to talk. So that's when you get to speak to what is bothering you. And I like to use the AID model for this, which is to state the specific action that happened or the behavior of the other person, and then the impact that had on you. Because we can collect a lot of information in the world, but we never know what someone else is feeling unless they tell us. So this is your opportunity to share from your heart how exactly this has impacted you. And people relate better to those kinds of feelings than to objective facts. You can't argue with someone's feelings. And then the 6th step is to work together to find a solution. So you may have ideas about what might work to resolve this, and you can certainly share those, but you need to work together in order to come up with a solution that works for both of you.
Well, thank you for sharing the 6-step framework. And what I love about the how you started the discussion was around reframing. Yeah. Reframing it is super powerful. And part of the framework is really the step about what story are you making. And I never really thought about that until you mentioned it. That at work, certain people come in late, certain people talk about that person, and you're right. It depends on how well you like the person or how well you don't like the person, and you hear people say their story differently, and it's kind of interesting after you said that. And really, it's also interesting you said about talking about the situation in a third party perspective. That's also, it makes it neutral. And then listening. At times when people go into an argument, they're not listening. They're talking at each other, not to. So there's there's really both yelling at each other instead of having conversation. And then listening is super powerful. And then having your chance to actually say what you have to say. And the last part, immensely important, have to work together, right? If you don't work together and learn together, that's not going to happen. Yeah. The reality is, though, even though we said we learned this, one of the challenges that we face is things that we learned when we were young. They're one part of who we are. What are your suggestions of how people could slowly break out of that mold? maybe unlearn. The word unlearn comes to mind. How do they unlearn what they learned to learn this new skill that you're sharing?
I think that awareness is the first step
Yeah.
with a lot of this kind of stuff. And so just noticing and observing in yourself what your assumptions and habits are. The thing about culture, you mentioned culture, is that like our approaches to conflict, we're just immersed in it. It's like fish in the ocean. You don't know that you're wet, right? And it takes stepping out of your own culture to be able to have some perspective on it. So in the same way, when you think about conflict, if you can kind of step out of your sort of default reactions or habits, then and notice what you're doing and notice how other people approach conflict too. I love to read and listen to podcasts too. So I soak up information as much as I can. Yeah, so I think that would be the second advice I would give, is to try to educate yourself. And then again, like I said at the beginning, be prepared to make mistakes. Like like have some compassion for yourself that you're going to fall into your old habits, even if you're trying to learn or try something new, and give yourself a little bit of break for that learning process.
Like, give yourself a grace, right? You give
Yeah.
yourself the grace that you're not going to be doing this perfectly, and
Yeah.
you're going to make a mistake. I love the concept of awareness. Awareness, in my opinion, it's life's greatest gift. Once you're aware of it, you sort of move in the right direction, because every time something happens and it's the same thing, you like, yeah, I think I remember that. Now I know how to proceed. So thank you for highlighting awareness. Let's talk about bias. Bias
Mhm.
often operate at a subconscious level. How do you define bias, and how can individual learn to recognize their bias?
My definition of bias is that it's a mental shortcut that our brains make without us even realizing it. Bias is actually good for humans. I mean, it's how we survived. Early humans lived in a world where they had to make really quick risk assessments of their environment in order to stay safe. So our brains evolved to use these mental shortcuts to process the millions and millions of bits of information that are getting thrown at us every moment. And most of that information gets processed unconsciously. So this is what you're saying, that bias operates at an unconscious level. You're absolutely right. These shortcuts, as much as they've helped us survive, they also can lead to errors in how we perceive, how we remember, how we reason, how we make decisions. If you've ever looked at an optical illusion, that's bias at work. The way that your brain is processing what you're looking at, you're not in conscious control over that, even when you know that you're looking at an illusion. So that explains kind of the power of bias too, in how that it can allow us to misplace or make mistakes with our judgments. And lots of research has been done on bias, how it impacts our view of time, past
Hmm.
events, even there's research about juries and how we don't remember crimes the way we think we do. So all of that kind of stuff, bias plays into it. And when it comes to bias about other people, or like what we often call stereotypes, that information is fed to us, as you say, from when we're infants all the way through our lives. And one of the writers that I admire who talks about this topic describes, she's a psychologist, her name's Beverly Daniel Tatum. She said that these messages that we receive from the world around us through every form of media, from our parents, from our teachers, and all of the people who we meet as we're growing up, it's like a smog that we're breathing every day. And as Beverly Tatum says, we don't breathe it because we like it. We breathe it because it's the only air that's available. So again, a lot of people want to believe that they don't have bias because bias sounds like a bad thing, but bias is an innately human trait. We all have it, whether you like it or not. And it's just something that we have to kind of, again, build an awareness around. So the first step, again, is to try to pay attention. So instead of slipping into old habits, you can choose willful awareness. This is a term that Dolly Chugg has coined. And she says that curiosity is at the heart of willful awareness. So again, trying to notice your own bias and how it shows up in your relationships and in your work. The other thing that willful awareness does is remind us that it's okay and it's actually preferable to notice difference. Some people would rather emphasize how we're all the same deep down. We're all humans, and that's good. But, and it's true that looking for common ground can unite people from different sides of an issue. But inequality exists. And if you try to ignore that fact, it actually can, it actually perpetuates the inequality that exists
Yes.
because of bias. There's vast differences in how people experience life based on their race, their ethnicity, their gender, and so on. And to ignore these differences and attempt to connect will actually have the opposite effect. There was a really cool study that I read about, modeled after the Guess Who game. Do you know that game?
No, no.
Okay, so it's a game where each side of the, like, your partner and you have a face that only you can see, and you're trying to describe that person to
Okay.
your partner in order for them to guess who it is. So the researchers designed this study where 50% of the people on the little Guess Who card were Black and 50% of them were white. And they found that when the person looking at and trying to describe the person to their partner, if they mentioned whether they were Black or white, they were more likely, obviously, to win the game. But a lot of people were reluctant to mention race when they were describing somebody. And as a result of that, the people who didn't mention race were more likely to be seen as racist
Oh,
by
really?
their partner than if they
Wow.
didn't talk about it. So this is just another example of how we're like reluctant to acknowledge difference, but actually that's the whole point. It's there and we have to talk about it. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you for explaining what bias and how we recognize and be aware of it. I want to move on to the next topic, which is empathy. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I think, in my experience, empathy plays an important role in building relationship. How does leader use that in the workplace? Because at times in the workplace they look at empathy as being soft. Because that
Mm-hmm.
I've done, and I'm a empathetic leader. And sometimes my boss would say, "You're soft. You're weak." And
Right.
to me, it wasn't. I don't agree with it, but I don't bother to fight the argument. But how does leader use that to their advantage?
Yeah. So I want to back up and first define what empathy is. So
Yes.
empathy, yeah, refers to three processes that promote kindness in different ways. One is sharing another person's experience. The second is thinking about someone else's perspective. And then the third is caring about others and hoping, like doing things to try to make them feel better. So all of those things are important. When we think about empathy, it's our sort of knee-jerk definition is one of those three things, which is sharing someone else's experience or trying to imagine. Sometimes we try to imagine what they're feeling. Thinking about what someone else is feeling is one of the four elements of emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
And lots of research has shown that having emotional intelligence in the workplace actually leads to better outcomes. Stronger teams, more productivity, less stress. The list goes on and on and on. And this has been shown again and again in research. So anybody who thinks this is one of these soft skills that's like a waste of time is wrong.
Yes. I agree.
So, yeah, in fact, one of the studies said that empathy and emotional intelligence in general is the single biggest predictor of performance in the workplace and the strongest driver of leadership and personal life. And I think the reason that that works is because it allows us to approach our relationships with a certain amount of humility and a willingness to imagine someone else's perspective, which leads to, as you can imagine, to stronger relationships. And when we have strong relationships, when we work on teams, then we're going to get more done. So learning about others, then this does, we've talked about with difficult conversations and with bias, again, it's all about awareness and being open to being wrong, questioning what you feel and think in a given situation, and being, open to the fact that other people might have a different way of thinking or feeling about the same situation. Yeah. The other thing I'll say about empathy is that lots of research shows that we can dial up our empathy like a volume knob on a stereo. So empathy is not a fixed trait. Like we can develop our empathy, we can learn to be more empathetic. And I think that kind of gives people a bit of, again, grace to grow and to learn and to change how they approach some of these situations.
Well, I love the fact that you mentioned we could develop empathy, right? And
Mm-hmm.
because some people think that, like leadership, it's born, or you have it or you don't. But
Yeah.
both of them, you can learn it, and that's really a fact.
Yeah.
Let's move on to, like, talking about learning. Learning how to problem solving is extremely important in anyone's life.
Yeah.
And I know you know a particular tool named Colby. that's
Mhm.
used for helping people improve their ability to solve problems. Can you give us perspective about Colby and how you use it?
Yeah, thank you. So, yes, I'm a certified Colby consultant. Colby is spelled Kolbe if you're looking it up. Colby is an assessment that measures how we take action or how we problem solve. So, it's not a personality test. So, it's not, you may have heard of Myers Briggs or Strength Finder or DISC or Insights,
Yes.
Luminous Spark. Yeah, all of those. Those are all personality assessments and they're great and they can give you helpful information and a lot of people use them in the workplace. Colby is different in that it doesn't measure our affect or our personality. It measures how we take action, how our striving instincts, how we solve problems. So there's you end up with four numbers when you do a Colby assessment, and they correspond to what Colby calls action modes. So the four action modes are fact finder, follow through, quick start, and implementer. And those four action modes each have a number from 1 to 10. So you can imagine like a little continuum. So there's the one end of the spectrum and the 10, and then everything in between. So with a fact finder, you end up with a 1 to 10 number on all four
Yeah.
of those. And usually one of those four is kind of your dominant
Right.
action
Yeah.
mode.
Dominant.
Yeah. So I'm an 8443. That's my Colby profile. So I'll just explain what that means. So 8, the first number, refers to my fact finder instinct. And being an 8, that means I'm at kind of the high end of the scale. And that tells you that I love to research. I love to gather data. And my way of problem solving, because that's my initiating energy, is to begin a problem solving process by collecting information. So if you bring me a problem as the CEO, I'm going to ask you a lot of questions about that problem in order to ascertain everything I can about it before I make a decision. The same thing is true when I buy a new appliance. I'm going to read consumer reports and do lots of research. If I go on vacation, I'm going to, research the city that I'm visiting and what attractions that I want to go to. I might even make an Excel spreadsheet about it. Whereas a 1 or 2 on Fact Finder, these are the Coles Notes people. I've already told them too much information if they're listening. They just want the high level kind of bullet points. They don't need a lot of data in order to feel comfortable moving forward with a decision. I will say here that Colby only measures strengths. I'm not saying that my way of doing it is better than the 1 or 2. And we need all of these different talents and strengths on a team. We
Yeah.
absolutely need people who are good at summarizing information and moving on. Because if you have a team full of fact finders, you can end up in what's called analysis paralysis, right?
Yes.
You've probably heard of that. The second one, my 4, is in an action mode called follow through. And this is how we measure space or like how we organize space. So the spectrum runs from the 1, 2, 3 people who are kind of like a fly by the seat of their pants, sort of very adaptable, really good at dealing with a lot of information and conflict and issues that
Vagueness.
kind of get thrown at you. Say it again. Yes. Yeah. Vagueness. Yes. And the other end of the spectrum of follow through are people who are really organized. They love systems and procedures. They follow things
That could
step
be
by
me.
step. That would be you. Okay. They like routine in their daily lives. Their spice cabinet is alphabetized sometimes. Yeah. Everything in their
Yeah.
home has a place. Yeah. So I'm a 4 on follow through, which means that I'm more at the kind of adaptable end of the spectrum, but I appreciate the need for structure and organization. I just don't necessarily do things the same way every time I do them. The third one is called Quick Start, and this is how we deal with risk and uncertainty. So a 1, 2, 3 Quick Start is really good at protecting the status quo. They don't like a lot of risk. They deal out as much uncertainty as they can. Whereas a 7, 8, 9, 10 quick start is somebody who's really comfortable taking risks. These are the entrepreneurs of the world. These are the folks who are willing to start up a new business and see what happens, even if they've never done that before. So again, you can imagine how we need both. We need people who are up in the sky dreaming big, and we need people who are down on the ground kind of holding the strings of the umbrella or the balloon, right? And then the last one is called implementer, and this is how we deal with space intangibles. So the 1, 2, 3 people like me, I'm a 4, or I'm a 3, I beg your pardon. And I like to think about things in a very abstract way. I can conceptualize ideas in my mind's eye. Whereas a 7, 8, 9, 10 implementer is someone who uses three-dimensional objects to solve problems. So these are carpenters, mechanics, bakers, gardeners, like people who use their hands and use tools. A lot of engineers and computer programmers are also high on implementer because you can think about technology being a tool that we use to
Yeah.
solve problems as well. Yeah,
I could see that I'm high on that one because my background was software development for many
there you
years.
go.
I think what I like about Colby is really knowing what the strength of your people, and I love the fact that you said focus on strength. By knowing what they're really good at, you could really enable them to shine. So
Exactly.
I'm personally gonna tell you I'm gonna take the Colby test. I
Amazing.
sort of
Well,
know
I
where I
will.
stand. I sort of know, but I would take it because I really want to know it. And it's
Yeah.
important to actually tell people more about this because it's a very powerful assessment that helps you to improve your overall performance. So thank you for sharing that tool to all of us. I want to jump in to talk about your book because it's an
Mhm.
award-winning book. Your book, The Heart of Homestay, has won award and resonated with many readers. What inspired you to write it? And what do you hope the reader would take away from it?
Thanks. Well, first of all, I've always wanted to write a book since I was a kid. So writing has been a passion of mine for my whole life. And when I was working in Homestay in our family business, I noticed that there was a gap in this kind of resource. There was no book like this on the market. And when you're an author, you'll hear from agents and publishers that not seeing any other books like yours can either be a really good thing or a really bad thing. I
I
decided
think
it
it should be a
was
good thing.
it was a good thing. So this is not a kind of a hosting 101. Like a lot of programs will obviously offer orientations and host guides for their families. This really is a lot deeper than that. So it takes some of those common challenges that hosts face in their hosting experience and offers, first of all, a story or more than one to understand what someone else has gone through so people can relate. We learn best as humans through storytelling. So
Yes.
sharing a story about somebody, like a true experience of another host family, allows people to see themselves in the book and to really relate to the solution that I'm offering. And so I was at a stage in my career where I had some valuable insights to share that I thought would be really useful. And I wanted to write not just a sensational sort of collection of stories about all the disastrous things we've seen, but really it's meant to, showcase the beauty of homestay. And I think that's what we're hearing. As you mentioned, I've won a couple of awards on the book, and all of the feedback and reviews that I've seen so far, people use words like inspiring and insightful. And that's really what I want people to take away. I want to put a spotlight on the people in the world who are really trying to break down barriers between cultures and make the world a smaller place. People who value cross-cultural exchange and living with other people who are different from us is one of the most beautiful and powerful ways to build understanding. I really believe that every culture has something valuable to say about being human. And I want that message out there right now, especially with what's happening in, geopolitically at the
Yes.
moment.
First of all, congratulations on your book. Secondly, I want to commend you for being like an ambassador of like cultural, unity and enablement. And therefore, it's really important for people to hear and read your book in many ways. So really ask everyone, buy the book, read her book, and post your review. I think you'll really love the book. And I'm
Thank
going to
you.
read the book too. I promise that, and I'll send you a note after I read it. Let's talk about reviews. I'm an author too, and I often read my reviews, and I want to hear what they have to say. Among the reviews that you got so far, what's the one or two reviews that really resonate well with you? Caught you off guard because you didn't really think of it that way.
One that comes to mind when you ask that question are the readers who have worked in international education for decades or hosts who've had hundreds of students. And they will tell me that they still learned something new from reading my book. That feels very
Wow,
rewarding.
that's powerful.
Yeah. And it's a reminder, like we've been talking about through this whole conversation, that we all have something to learn every day. So I think that's one of my core values is learning and growth and personal growth. So hearing that those kinds of readers are still getting value from the book it's really great for me.
That's immensely powerful because especially those people who have hosted hundreds. You would
Hmm.
think they've seen everything in the
Right?
world. And when they read,
Yeah.
you'd be like, "Oh, I know all of this." And like all of a sudden, I didn't know this, I didn't know that. And I think I love the fact that you're promoting the sort of the culture of learning, right?
Hmm.
Building curiosity as part of your DNA and continue to believe in learning, and reading is one of the best part. That's why I love like physical book, because I really love to turn the page. Just flipping the page and being able to fold the corner of the book and says, I'm going back to that chapter or that page.
Oh,
I
yeah.
absolutely love it.
I do too. I do the same thing. Or I have those little colored sticky tabs that I'll put in if I want to be
Oh,
able to flip
I
back.
do have those. I do have
Yeah.
those. Yeah. Now you remind me. I should make sure I bring it when I read the book and put it, because I
Yeah.
had one book full of sticky tabs before.
Yeah.
So for our audience who's listening today's episode, what's one takeaway or maybe two takeaway that you want them to remember?
So the first, jumping right back to our very first topic, was
Yeah.
don't keep putting off that difficult conversation that you know you need to have. You might be surprised by how well it can go, and prepare in advance so that you can make the most of it. And then the second thing is to remember that diversity is one of the keys to team performance. So being different from others is not a bad thing, and understanding how much we have to learn from each other, and that we all have different strengths and different cultures and different backgrounds, and that all of that stuff is really important to help us understand more about ourselves and to work better as a team.
Thank you for sharing that, like handling conflict and dealing with it. And I want to remind people, we talk about the 6 steps. Jennifer mentioned the 6 step early
Yeah.
on. So if you got to this part of the episode, go back and listen to the 6 steps, because that's what can help you be good at handling conflict. If my
Exactly.
audience wants to reach out to you, invite you to speak at an event or do a workshop, what's the best way to reach out to you?
Absolutely. You can find me at jenniferrobinwilson.com. Don't forget my middle name because Jennifer Wilson is a really common name. So, yeah, jenniferrobinwilson.com. And my handles on social media are all at Jennifer Robin Wilson.
Thank you, Jennifer, for being a guest on my podcast. I truly appreciate you being my guest, and congratulations on your book again. I promise I'm going to read the book and I'm going to let you know when I finish it. Thank you
I'm
for your time.
so grateful, Will, and I'll read your book too.
Thank you. Take care.